Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of what is not just the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, but this is the finale of 60 years of Delta flights, the final Delta IV Heavy rocket preparing to lift off this afternoon. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm Will Robinson-Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Stephen Young is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Adam Bernstein also out in the field, getting ready to track the rocket, do some still photography today. Our Michael Caine has the afternoon off as he is making his way back from Texas following a successful venture in shooting the total solar eclipse from there. If you're not already following our launch photography team, you can find them on their social channels here on X. You can find Adam Bernstein at ABurnNYC, Michael Caine at MT Caine Jr. Both did some eclipse photography yesterday, currently up on their feeds at the moment. And also, if you're not already following Spaceflight Now, you can find us on most social channels simply at Spaceflight Now. We are on Facebook, Threads, X, and of course right here on YouTube. We are currently L-1 hour, 26 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. T-1 hour, 11 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. We will also have assistance with this launch coverage today from our friend B. Carstens with Max Q Productions. In the center of your screen, you're taking a look at Space Launch Complex 37, aka Slick 37. In a little less than an hour and a half, United Launch Alliance, or ULA, will attempt to launch its 16th and final Delta IV Heavy rocket on the NROL-70 mission. This will deliver a classified payload to orbit on behalf of the National Reconnaissance Office here in the United States. The launch window officially opens at 12:53 p.m. Eastern Time. For our friends joining from around the world, that is 16:53 UTC. ULA does have a roughly 4-hour launch window today, but so far the countdown has been running smoothly according to ULA. No hiccups as of now, and fueling continues to move along on track for an on-time liftoff at the start of the window, again at 12:53 p.m. Eastern, 16:53 UTC. As is the case with Atlas V launches, Delta IV Heavy also has 2 built-in 15-minute holds in its countdown timeline, the first of which happens prior to fueling, starting at T-4 hours and 15 minutes. And that's to make sure that everything is in place to begin the start of loading the rocket with liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. That 15-minute planned hold came and went, and a go for fueling was issued shortly before 8:30 a.m. Eastern today. And that means they have one more planned 15-minute hold coming up at T-4 minutes, during which they will assess if they are ready to proceed towards the terminal count. For those who were here with us for our last time trying to track the finale of the Delta IV Heavy rocket, you know that they got into and just barely out of that planned 4-minute hold at the end of last countdown. A couple of issues cropped up though. There was the factor of the weather, which created a violation in the ground winds for ULA and the Delta IV Heavy flight back on March 28th. And so they initially were holding for that, but then there was the issue that cropped up with the gaseous nitrogen pipeline. That issue has since been resolved. We did reach out to both NASA, Kennedy Space Center, who's the owner of the pipeline, and Air Liquide, which is the company whose job it is. They're the prime contractor, so they manage the pipeline. They gave us a statement stating, and I quote in part, Air Liquide confirms that a pump failure occurred on March 28th at its nitrogen plant supplying NASA's Space Launch System. Air Liquide worked diligently with NASA to understand the circumstances and resolve the situation, and is prepared on site to support the rescheduled launch of the Delta IV Heavy rocket. Unfortunately, no further details were provided on exactly what the fix was, but given that we've seen a couple of SpaceX launches from the Cape since that scrub happened, and United Launch Alliance is in position for a launch today, and they are tracking no issues. Whatever the remedy seems to be holding fairly well, and that puts us in our launch opportunity today, where we are currently L-1 hour, 22 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. T-1 hour, 7 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. Once that hold at T-4 minutes comes into play, nominally that hold will last for 15 minutes, after which the T- and L- clocks will come into sync, and we will go into the terminal count. Again, because ULA does have the ability to hold and top off, they can remain in that hold the T-15 minute mark for a little bit longer if necessary. Certainly appreciate the more than 2,200 of you who are joining us for our coverage of the finale of the Delta family of rockets. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button to allow some more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage. Share the stream as well, and also if you're not subscribed to Spaceflight Now, now's a good time to do so. We are oh so close to reaching 200,000 subscribers, and we would love to count you among them. Subscribing to the channel is quick, easy, free to do so. And we have a wonderful community here in the live chat who are happy to talk with you all about rocketry, space, spacecraft, and a whole bevy of life topics on the side. We're also powered by our wonderful channel member community. So thanks to channel members like Sherilyn Trotter, Mark Otto, Stefan Michael, that Opal guy, Jeff Hansen, Carla Barnes, the Brack Productions LLC. I believe I saw Stephanie Lee in there, or Callistia Lee, excuse me. Been up since about 3 o'clock this morning, so apparently still waking up just a little bit here. But thanks to all of our wonderful channel members. Channel membership comes with a number of wonderful perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, where you can find things like embroidered mission patches. Channel membership also includes the ability to watch our member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our Cape-based launches in 4K. Special shout out to our moderators in the live chat. Stephanie B, I see you joining us today. Keep an eye out for our other mods as well. They're able to find their way in on a Tuesday afternoon. Thanks for keeping things kosher in the live chat. Last but not least, you can help support what we do here at Spaceflight Now and join in the conversation by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be supporting what we do here on the channel, but you'll also give us some interesting things to talk about. Of course, if your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the show, we'd love to include you in the dialogue. Speaking of channel members, going back to that for just a second here, I want to thank M. Teresa for being a channel member for 1 month at the pad leader level. Really appreciate that, M. Teresa. And M says, waving bye, Delta. The scheduled 16th and final launch of Delta IV Heavy today at 12:53 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. been a busy morning for United Launch Alliance after they gave that go for the start of prop load this morning around 8:30. Things have been chugging along smoothly here. ULA is running the countdown for this final Delta flight from its Delta Operations Center, or the dock, which is located at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. ULA also has support for this launch in part from teams in Colorado. Again, the current T0 time for ULA and the departure of the Delta IV Heavy is 12:53 p.m. That's 16:53 for our friends around the world. And if for whatever reason ULA does need to pivot away from a launch opportunity today, they do have a 24-hour backup opportunity at the same time tomorrow. Taking a look at the wide shot here across the water from the pad, you can see weather is much more ideal for a launch today as opposed to the last go-around. As you recall, it was an abysmal, just 30% favorable for go weather. Prior to the start of fueling, meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron confirmed that we are still tracking 90% favorable conditions for liftoff today. The only watch item are those cumulus clouds you see hanging around, which will likely not be preventative for liftoff. However, for folks watching a little bit further away, while I hope this is not the case, you may be a little stifled as far as the ability to see the rocket as clearly as you might want to. So we will bring you wonderful images from our tracking team there on the Cape side of the operation. You can see this vehicle up close and personal as it departs one last time. Again, with ULA having that 24-hour backup opportunity if it's needed for tomorrow on a weather front, situation deteriorates just a little bit. It's 80% favorable, 20% odds of violating weather. And the ground winds, as we saw last time, come into play. Again, that is just in a 24-hour backup opportunity, not today. We're now L minus 1 hour, 13 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. T minus 58 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. At this point, fueling has concluded on the Delta IV Heavy rocket. The rocket now clocking in at 1.6 million pounds now that it is fully loaded. Last step in that process was completing the loading of liquid oxygen on board the Delta Cryogenic Second Stage, or the DCSS. ULA says they are still working toward a good on-time departure at 12:53 p.m. Eastern, 16:53 UTC, so that is all good news. At this point, they are doing what they describe as their standard post-fueling inspections, where they use some of their cameras at the launch pad to inspect the outer thermal insulation on the outside of the 3 common booster cores. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank a couple of our channel members for their generosity today. Thanks to Callistia Lee and Mark Otto for each gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that from the two of you. If you're one of our newest channel members, be sure to give them a thanks in the live chat if you haven't already. Our thanks also to Susan Everett for joining us at the Mission Specialist level with channel membership. Really appreciate that, Susan. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. I hope you enjoy the perks of channel membership. And speaking of channel members, our thanks to SG for joining us today with a $3 super chat, getting us off on a good start. Well, if you recall from hearing from Tory Bruno before about the Delta IV Heavy rocket, your recollection may be that he's nicknamed it, quote, the most metal of all rockets. And there's a reason for that. The nickname didn't just come out of the ether. Prior to the mission today, or in the run-up really to the last launch attempt, we had the opportunity to talk with ULA President and CEO Tory Bruno, as well as leadership from Space Launch Delta 45 and the NRO about this mission. So here is ULA President and CEO Tory Bruno on why, to him, Delta IV will always be the most metal rocket.
So it is a LOX hydrogen first stage, which is a little bit unusual. We like those propellants because they're very, very high performance. And in order to prepare the RS-68 engines to get that very cold cryogenic propellant flowing through them, before they're ignited, we start flowing that propellant. And hydrogen is lighter than air, and so after it flows through the engine into the flame trench, it then rises. And when the engines are finally cool and ready to go and we start spinning up the pumps, then we actually drop the main load and we ignite it, and that flame carries on up that sort of plume, if you will, of hydrogen, which is clinging to the side of the booster and rising up. It is one of the reasons there's SOFI insulation, that striking orange insulation on the boosters. Part of that's, of course, for aero heating, but the thickness of it is to account for that effect. And so we get our nice toasted marshmallow boosters and the very dramatic effect of self-emulating the booster, and then away she goes.
And our thanks again to ULA President and CEO Tory Bruno for providing some illumination, if you will, as to why we see the rocket self-immolate, as you said, and adding to the importance of the external checks that they're doing of that thermal protection around the 3 common booster cores to ensure a safe departure and final flight of Delta IV. We're now L-1 hour, 9 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 54 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. Again, if you're just joining us here for our live launch coverage of the final Delta IV Heavy mission, countdown clock stands at L minus 1 hour, 6 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. T minus 51 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. The reason we have an L minus clock here on the screen, which will pivot to a T minus clock in a little bit, but the L minus is the time until launch. And the reason there's discrepancy is because for the Delta IV Heavy rocket, there is one last 15-minute planned hold in the countdown that happens prior to them entering the terminal count. And so once they exit that 15-minute hold at T minus 4 minutes, then the L minus and T minus clocks will sync up and we will pivot over to what you normally see at the top right-hand corner of your screen, a T minus clock. Originally today was supposed to have one other launch that we were waiting to see go off. That was going to be the inaugural flight of the Roscosmos Angara A5 rocket. However, that mission had to be scrubbed due to, according to Roscosmos, a failure of the URM-1 oxidizer tank pressurization system. And that triggered an automated scrub. And happening in the final minutes before liftoff. That mission could be scheduled for another attempt as soon as tomorrow, but we'll wait and see if we get official word from Roscosmos that they will take another bite at that apple. Certainly been a busy morning for United Launch Alliance as it's been going through the motions in preparation for this launch today. Like with the last go around, it starts with the rollback of the building structure you see behind the rocket. That is the mobile service tower. Unlike an Atlas V launch where the rocket is stacked and then rolls out to the launch pad at Slick 41. In this case, the tower itself is hoisted up on hydraulics, rolled back about the length of a football field, and then set down. That tower clocks in at about 10 million pounds. And while unfortunately we had to clear out before the rollback happened today, here's a time lapse of what that rollback sequence looks like. This captured by our Adam Bernstein in the hours prior to that last launch attempt back on March 28th. They use about 40 hydraulic cylinders to raise that mobile service tower about 8 inches off the ground, roll it back, again, about 100 yards away from the rocket itself. The roll this morning started at about 6:15 a.m., and there was a hard down milestone that was reached at about 6:57 a.m. Eastern. Hard down just means that's when motion stops and they're able to secure it. We are now 1 hour away from the planned launch of the final Delta IV Heavy rocket today. As we are now less than an hour away, let's welcome in some new folks as we're closing in on about 5,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you're just joining us, first of all, welcome. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live launch coverage of the 16th and final launch of a Delta IV Heavy rocket, the launch company United Launch Alliance, or ULA. And Will Robinson-Smith providing commentary for the duration of our live launch coverage. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button to allow some more folks to find their way on in here to our live launch coverage, as we're now L-minus 59 minutes on the dot. Now just under 44 minutes on the T-minus clock. If you are just stepping in with us at this point in time, and it's been a minute since you've seen an Atlas launch, the reason we have an L-minus clock at the top right-hand corner of the screen is because that is the countdown to the planned liftoff of the Delta IV Heavy rocket. The T-minus clock will be coming, but not until toward the end of the countdown. There is one planned 15-minute hold remaining in the countdown today, following first 15-minute hold, which happened at L-minus 4 hours and 15 minutes. That hold happens prior to fueling to make sure that everything is in good order before they start loading the rocket with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And fueling has gone smoothly so far. The rocket is fully fueled, clocking in at about 1.6 million pounds at this point. As the teams have spent the last 10 to 15 minutes or so doing post-fueling inspections of the outer thermal insulation using some of the cameras at the launch pad. They've also done some gimbaling tests of the engines as well. Taking a look back here at the live chat, want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Donna Hayes, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Donna. Thank you for that generosity. And to our 5 newest channel members there, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And I also want to welcome Philip Campo for joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level, and to Frank Ward for joining us at the Mission Specialist level. Thanks to the both of you, and we hope you enjoy the perks of channel membership, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and the ability to watch all of our Cape-based live coverage in 4K. Our thanks also to Charles Harrington for $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Charles, who has some kudos for our tracking team today, saying great views. And we've got our Adam Bernstein out in the field getting ready to track the rocket. Also, our editor, Stephen Young, donning some Australian headgear and helping Adam out in the field. Doing our level best to give you the best possible live launch coverage experience for this finale of a rocket with a legacy spanning more than 6 decades. And as we've gotten this question a number of times in the live chat, we'll hit it as we get toward the end of the countdown, but let's go ahead and step through the trajectory for today's flight. For the final launch of a Delta IV Heavy rocket, we're going to see one last liftoff of this 3-core vehicle from Space Launch Complex 37, or Slick 37. It's flying out in an easterly trajectory as it heads out over the Atlantic Ocean. As far as visibility, of course, this is an expendable rocket, so there's nothing to talk about as far as booster landing or things of that nature. But we do want to let you know, if you are in the Central Florida area, or even as far up as the Jacksonville area to the north and down towards Miami to the southern end of Florida, there's a chance you may actually be able to see the vehicle, again, assuming you don't get clouded out, which certainly hope that is the case. Here's a graphic on visibility from our friends at United Launch Alliance. We're just working through some technical difficulties here. We will get our views of the rocket back momentarily, and there we go. now L minus 50 minutes on the dot. T minus 34 minutes, 57 seconds now. Taking a look at the live chat here, one of our channel members, Urzaler, asking why this is the last Delta IV Heavy launch, and is it being replaced? Well, yes, it is in fact being replaced by the launch of ULA's Vulcan rocket. Of course, we saw the first flight of Vulcan that happened earlier this year. That was the launch of Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander. The second certification mission for Vulcan is coming up later this year when it launches the Dream Chaser space plane, which is manufactured by Sierra Space. A firm launch date for that has not been named yet, as the Dream Chaser is still up in Ohio at the NASA's Glenn, where it's going through some thermal vacuum testing and checkouts before it's shipped down here to Florida. The Vulcan rocket is a single stick vehicle and is significantly cheaper to manufacture and operate with a greater frequency as compared to the Delta IV Heavy. That being said, the legacy of the Delta IV and the Atlas V, which will also eventually be replaced by the Vulcan rocket once it's done with its missions, it does still carry some heritage hardware with it, and the lessons learned on both the Delta and Atlas vehicles was passed along into Vulcan. So here is ULA President and CEO Tory Bruno explaining how that heritage all weaves together.
When you develop a new rocket, I think my personal design philosophy, which I've, learned over many rocket developments, is you want to bring forward heritage elements that are reliable and you understand very well, and focus your new technology on things that will make a big difference in the performance of the rocket itself. And so Delta is brought forward technology and architectural elements from both Atlas, I said Delta, Vulcan, and Delta. And so when we look at the Vulcan, we see a 5.4 meter diameter rocket, and throughout its length, which we bring that scale over from the Delta IV platform, and especially the Delta IV Heavy. We have the modular rocket design with the solids that were both present on Delta IV Medium, but especially on Atlas, so that's an Atlas heritage element. When we started developing Vulcan, I had just begun refreshing the avionics for Atlas and Delta, and to be more producible and more affordable at that time, it was going to be a common avionics suite. But we were able to catch it in time and make it common between Atlas, Delta, and Vulcan, with a simplified box count, that sort of thing, more modern technology, more commercial electronic piece parts. So it's really a blending, as you say. There are new elements to that, the massive high energy upper stage, and now in the Centaur V versus the Centaur III, that is a new architectural element. And when we put all that together, when you develop the pieces of the rocket that are part of that integrated system that you designed to be a system, they don't all get done at the same point in time. And so one of our design strategies was to fly Vulcan before we flew it. So when the avionics got done, they started flying on the other rockets as they ran out of their heritage avionics suite. When we got the payload fairing done, we started flying that on Atlas. The SRBs are bigger for Vulcan, but only in that they're longer. They're about 5 feet longer. So when we developed those SRBs, we also developed a shorter version that was compatible with Atlas. So those have been flying for a while. So, while we're very proud of that perfect first mission on Vulcan, in all honesty, I have to confess to you that we had flown a lot of pieces of that rocket many times before we actually put them all together and flew them on a Vulcan. So You know, I'm sorry for that being complicated, but it really is like that. We took the best of one rocket, the best of the other rocket, combined them, added some new technology where it made a big difference in the performance or affordability of Vulcan, and that's what you saw go up, you know, back in January.
And our thanks to ULA President CEO Tory Bruno for providing that explanation on the heritage that Vulcan brought forward with it from both Atlas and Delta. We're now L minus 44 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. T minus 29 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. Less than 30, excuse me, about 25 minutes from the point which will hit the T minus 4 minute hold, which will last a nominal 15 minutes. That comes as they're doing some last minute checkouts and making sure that they're prepared to go into the terminal count those final 4 minutes before liftoff. Currently L minus 41 minutes, 39 seconds. T minus 26 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. I want to thank a couple more folks for their support this afternoon as we continue on through the count. Our thanks to Jeffrey Davis for a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Really appreciate that. And our thanks as well to Kelly Jones for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, Mr. Jones. Thanks for supporting us on that level, or Kelly, excuse me. Kelly says, love how much we see launches these days. And yes, it has been a very busy 2024 covering launches just from here in the United States, let alone the rest of the world. If everything stays on course, this will be the 41st launch for a U.S. launch company, the 38th from here in the contiguous United States, and the 68th overall orbital launch on the year. So we are off to a roaring start in 2024. So far, you've heard from ULA President CEO Tory Bruno about this mission, but as we previously mentioned, we also heard from leaders at Space Launch Delta 45, as well as the director of the NRO about this mission, its meaning to them and the country, and why the Delta IV Heavy rocket was chosen as the launch vehicle for this classified spacecraft. So as you're now just under 40 minutes to the planned liftoff, let's go ahead and let you hear from General Pansenhagen and Dr. Scalise.
Just from a personal standpoint, very exciting for me to be here. I was a young captain when we launched the first couple Delta IV Heavies out of here, so to see that kind of come full circle is a really special moment in my career. From a Space Force standpoint, our mission is securing our nation's interest in, from, and to space. So this is a very visible example of the to space part of that, but it's also a very visible example of the partnership that it takes to do this. The interagency partnership between NRO and the Space Force, but then also we wouldn't be able to do this without our industry partners as well. So honored to be working with these two gentlemen and both of their agencies, and looking forward to getting that capability on orbit.
There really isn't much that I can say other than it's a national security payload that's going to provide exquisite capability that is needed by a lot of people and organizations. Clearly the policymakers, the warfighter, and others, so that they can know what's going on the Earth. It takes a lot of planning in order to put a payload on a rocket, and so we needed time to do it, and we had the spacecraft ready to go, and we had a rocket that we trust, so it made sense to continue on with this. Something has to be last, and we're proud to be that vehicle, and we have a lot of confidence in the system. That's the rocket, ULA, the Space Force, the Cape, everybody that's involved in it. So it just made sense to go at this time.
And again, that was Brigadier General Pansenhagen and Dr. Chris Scalise, leaders of both SLD-45 and the NRO, respectively. We're now L-minus 37 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. T-minus 22 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. ULA confirms that currently they are working no issues. They have a green board. Weather is good. Again, it was 90% favorable as they headed into fueling for today's operations, and weather continues to track in a good direction. Talking about the rocket itself, the Delta IV has 3 common booster cores. At the base of each is an RS-68A main engine. And at liftoff, together they provide 2.1 million pounds of thrust. Delta IV Heavy rocket stands at about 235 feet tall. The Delta cryogenic second stage, powered by a single RL-10C2-1 engine produced by Aerojet Rocketdyne. Aerojet Rocketdyne also manufactures the RL-10CX engine that will power future flights of the Vulcan rocket as well. So continues ongoing and well-established relationship between those two companies. Aerojet Rocketdyne, of course, now an L3 Harris company. Both the common core boosters as well as the upper stage are use the same propellant mixture of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. As previously mentioned, this will be the finale of the Delta family of rockets, which have been launching since the 60s. In total, there have been 388 launches of a Delta rocket since they began flying, 293 from the East Coast, 95 from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. It includes 155 flights of the Delta II rocket. Taking a look back here at our live chat, first off, I want to thank the more than 11,000 of you who are taking some of your lunchtime away to either listen in the background while you're eating a sandwich or enjoying whatever other lunch you may have packed if you're in a lunchtime area, or if you're just squirreling away some time from your workday to be with us. Really appreciate you. If you haven't already, if you could hit the like button, allow some more folks to find this live stream, that would be greatly appreciated. And looking at the live chat, I want to thank a few more folks for your support this afternoon. Want to welcome Dag Nabbit for that's a great handle. Joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Thank you so much, Dag Nabbit. Also with a $3 super chat. Really appreciate that as well. Thank you for your support this afternoon. Our thanks also to PA Comanche for a $5 super chat. And PA says, in the late 80s, I worked on the RL-10 test stand. We chased hydrogen leaks all the time. Yes. Hydrogen leaks are certainly a pesky thing, and if you want to talk to PA more in the live chat about that, I'm sure he's got quite a number of stories to tell. Love to hear some of those in the future. See here on the wide shot a helicopter passing by briefly, doing some checkouts around the area. Our thanks also to Swampman81 for being a channel member here for a month. Love to see those longtime channel members, but also those of you who are marking 1 and 2 month anniversaries, because it's the beginning of a beautiful relationship, and we're glad to have you with us in our community. Swamman says, what's up, fellow space nerds? Who's ready for this launch today? I'd say there's at least 11,849 other folks who are ready for a launch today. Really appreciate everyone being here. Our thanks also to Charles Harrington for a very generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Charles, for supporting us at that level. Really, that is very generous of you, and it's very much appreciated. Charles asks, when is the next planned crewed launch? If all goes according to plan, that will be the first crewed flight of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, which will be lifting off from Slick 41, ULA's other pad over at the Cape, atop an Atlas V rocket. That will mark United Launch Alliance's 100th Atlas flight. That mission's set to lift off currently on May 6th, although that is contingent on a couple of other items happening beyond ULA and Boeing control. Need to see the undocking of the the cargo dragon, which is currently at the zenith or the space-facing port of the space station, and that'll splash down off the coast of Florida once the weather is good to support that. That's coming up at the end of this month. That'll be followed by the relocation of the Dragon that the Crew 8 team used to ride up to the station, and that'll clear up space at the forward-facing port on the Harmony module and open the path for the Starliner spacecraft with Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore riding aboard that first crew flight test mission. So that'll be the next manned launch, or the next crewed launch, rather, coming up again no earlier than May 6th. We're now L-minus 29 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Less than 30 minutes away from the swan song of the Delta IV Heavy rocket here. Getting some views now of the pad from United Launch Alliance here. Few of their different pad cameras giving us a tour around Space Launch Complex 37. And as you can see from these closer up shots, we are tracking good weather. Again, 90% favorable for the planned liftoff in a little less than 29 minutes from now. Want to bring your attention here to the T-minus clock from ULA in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Again, that clock will stop at T-minus 4 minutes for a planned 15-minute hold is the nominal plan for that. So the L- clock will continue to run, and at the end of the planned hold, the two clocks will come into sync. And that hold is used to conduct any final checkouts that are needed and make sure that ULA launch teams are in a good position to launch this final mission with the Delta IV Heavy rocket. What you're seeing here is a rendering of the Delta IV Heavy rocket broken apart into its separate pieces, and the manufacturing process, and how it makes its way down to the Cape here. It's loaded up on the barge called the Rocket Ship that ULA owns, leaves the factory up in Decatur and is barged on down the river before it arrives here. The three cores are mated together, rolled out to the mobile service tower. And finally, the payload is hoisted up on board and mated with the vehicle, stacked as you see here. One final time. This is the process of lifting up the MST, 10 million pounds, hoisted up about 8 inches off the ground and rolled back about 100 yards. And here's a look inside the control room of the MST as they're rolling that tower back. A time-lapse version, of course. It's not nearly that fast of a vehicle in a nominal setting. Not sure it could be that fast if it wanted to. Here's a look at the rocket as it stood after the first MST rollback. We're now L- 25 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. T- 10 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. Again, because this is a payload for the National Reconnaissance Office, not a lot is disclosed about the payload on board, but they did provide the mission patch design for this operation with a snow leopard and the heart of it. We're now L minus 22 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. T minus 7 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Just a little over 3 minutes away from the planned start of the 15-minute hold at T minus 4 minutes. Before we get to that point, though, I want to play one last piece of tape before that point, as this is the 16th and final Delta IV Heavy mission. ULA President CEO Tory Bruno was willing to discuss what his favorite flight was, something he previously said is something he'd rather not talk about, but since we are going out one last time, you may be able to guess. I'll give you a second to think about it, but this is Tory's favorite flight of the Delta IV Heavy.
Since we're here at the last launch, I'm going to admit, and I'm really sorry, Chris, but it's Parker Solar Probe. And not just because it was a cool mission where we were going to send a probe literally flying through the atmosphere of the sun, currently the fastest human object in the universe, but also because we could have Dr. Parker there with us, 90 years old, a rebel scientist who first said, space is not empty, it's full of solar wind and things like that, and they told him he was crazy, and he stuck to his guns, and eventually we had the honor of flying the culmination of his life's work. So up until this launch, that one is my favorite.
And that was, of course, Tory Bruno talking about the Parker Solar Probe mission, launched back in 2018 on Delta IV Heavy rocket. We are now L minus 20 minutes and counting. We are now T minus 4 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Less than a minute away from the start of the planned 15-minute hold. Have word from ULA that the upper level winds have, quote, been verified acceptable for flight. Another good indication that things are on track for a launch in less than 20 minutes.
Not ready position.
And with that, we have just officially entered the planned 15-minute hold at T minus 4 minutes. So the T minus clock will remain at T minus 4 minutes until we exit the hold at L minus 4 minutes. We're now L minus 14 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Still within the planned 15-minute hold at T minus 4 minutes. Just a little over 10 minutes away from the lifting of that planned hold. Of course, with this being the finale of the Delta family of rockets and the 16th and final launch of a Delta IV Heavy specifically, it'll be eventually replaced completely, both it and the Atlas V rocket, by the Vulcan. ULA says a lot of the pieces and parts towards that transition are on track as they are working to ramp up in their ideal goal to a cadence of 25 launches per year, and they hope to reach that cadence and have the infrastructure in place to do so by the end of 2025. Here's Tory Bruno on the progress towards getting to that cadence and what is still outstanding at this time.
Really happy with the performance of the BE-4. You know, it is, you know, the largest scale, you know, methane engine certainly in this engine cycle put together. So there was a lot of technical risk getting there, and there were challenges that paced the completion of that development. Those were all overcome. We had a perfect mission out of the BE-4. Our partners at Blue Origin, I don't mind telling you, and we shut down 1.2 seconds early. We're afraid it was their fault. It absolutely was not. It was because of that thermal modeling issue I talked about. The last little slug of methane going through and feeding into the engine was warmer and just took the engine out of its run box. That's why we shut down earlier. The engine performed flawlessly. The ISP, the performance of the engine, was higher than predicted. And confident enough now that we cash that in. You've been at this a long time. You know how we kind of play the engineering with this stuff. We hold back and don't count on the performance or even necessarily the weight savings we actually have until we're sure we can do it over and over. We'd seen it on the ground. We wanted to see it in the air, which we did. So very, very happy with the engine. Definitely worth the wait. In terms of the stockpile, yeah, in the supply chain, I will absolutely talk to that. You know, we have invested a lot of money in the infrastructure here at the pad, at our factory, and in our suppliers to be able to come up to this launch rate. And I'll give you a scoop. The launch site is being sized to do 25 plus missions a year. So, you know, maybe getting a little closer to 30. The current supply chain and factory were sized to do 19 builds a year. And so that meant we started building early and building up literally a stockpile and an inventory that would then burn down. That gives us more time to bring that side of the infrastructure up to that higher rate so that we didn't have to get both of them going at 25, 30 a year. The pacing item in our supply chain is BE-4. Everyone else is on track or early to the plan. Our solid rocket motors were feeling pressure for a little while for two reasons. One being we got a lot more of the missions that required a full set of solid rocket boosters than we expected, so we needed more. And also because the big expansion of casting capability in Utah required a lot of construction and, you know, excavation for giant casting pits. These are the longest single segment solid rocket motors ever produced. And so you dig a very deep hole in the ground to cast them in, and we hit granite, we hit bedrock, and so we were using a lot of dynamite for a while, and we're a little bit concerned, but about a week and a half ago we came through that. And so now we're back on track, back on schedule, so that leaves us with the BE-4. And the reason the BE-4 is a little bit behind everybody else is because it took a little longer to get it developed and finished, and it is now. We have wonderful facilities in the BE-4 factory in Huntsville that Blue Origin has built and expanded, literally doubled their factory size to do this. So they have to catch up now to everybody else building ahead. It'll be, I think it's going to be you know, adequate to need and support our manifest, but we're not really going to be on the build ahead plan this year in the front part of next year with Blue Origin until they then really hit their stride and they hit their production rate we're looking for, and then they'll catch back up and they'll build up an inventory like everybody else. That's the state of affairs today. It's why I can say with confidence that we'll make our manifest, and we're just going to need a little bit more time to get them built up.
Correct configuration for terminal count.
Verified.
L-9 minutes.
Performing a hold authority comm check. LSIC RF.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear as well. ATD.
ATD copies loud and clear.
Loud and clear as well. Comm check complete. Roger. Position. All steps are complete prior to the status check.
And we were just listening into the mission audio loops here. We're in the last few minutes of the planned 15-minute hold. As we come upon the final readiness pull, of course, we will go ahead and allow you to listen into that process. Taking a look inside the launch control areas for United Launch Alliance today. Here we go. Here's the final poll.
L-7 minutes.
Status check to proceed with terminal count. First stage systems, propulsion.
Go.
Hydraulics.
Go.
Locks.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Second stage systems, locks.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Electrical systems, airborne.
Go.
Ground.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
COM. Go. GCQ.
Go.
Operations support.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
Umbilicals.
Go.
HASGAS.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Red line monitor.
Go.
Mechanical engineering advisor. Go. Quality.
Go.
Ops safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
Launch vehicle is ready to launch.
Mission director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count.
L-6.
ALC verified T0 is set for 1653 Zulu.
Verified.
And with that, the poll is complete. We are go for launch. We are going to come out of the planned T-minus 4-minute hold in the next 32 seconds or so. At that point, our L- clock will sync with the T- clock that is currently holding right now, and we will enter into the terminal count.
TD on net 1, SV, configure for launch.
Roger.
TD out.
Swing arm lock pins pulled.
Roger. All steps are complete prior to terminal count.
With that, we are just a little more than 30 seconds away from the end of the planned hold. It was just beyond this point last time where they ran into some issues, so we will, of course, be closely watching and listening in as they release the hold and get past that point this time. Let's go ahead and listen in.
T-minus 4 minutes and counting. Minus 355.
Ground pyros enabled.
350.
The countdown clock is resumed and we are go for launch at 12.
And with that, you heard that we are now out of the final planned 15-minute hold. And we are proceeding into the final 4 minutes of the count.
Secure at flight level.
Minus 307.
We are well past the point where we hit the gaseous nitrogen issue last time, so things are already moving much better than previously.
Minus 249.
FTS internal.
We're now less than 3 minutes to the planned liftoff of the final Delta IV Heavy rocket.
CBC locks at flight pressure and flight level.
We're now coming up on the final 2 minutes before the planned liftoff of the Delta IV Heavy rocket. Certainly appreciate the more than
T-minus 2 minutes. The rocket, payload, ground system.
42,000 of you that are joining with us live. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate if you could give this live stream a like, allow more folks to find this coverage as we prepare to see the finale of the Delta family of rockets.
Enabled. FTS armed.
Minus 120.
OCUs armed. SCS count started.
We're now just over a minute away from launch.
T-minus 1 minute.
Go for main engine
T-minus
start.
1 minute.
Rock, report range status.
Range green.
Minus 50.
Second stage LH2 secure at flight level.
We're now 30 seconds out.
Minus 30.
Status check.
Go Delta.
Go NROL 70.
20 seconds. 15
Minus
seconds.
15.
Rofi ignition.
And here we go. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff. We have liftoff of the final Delta IV Heavy rocket for United Launch Alliance. Up top, NROL 70. A payload for the National Reconnaissance Office. 20 seconds into flight. Let's listen to the roar of the engines at the base of those 3 common core boosters. Still a great view from our tracker as the vehicle climbs in and out of the clouds here over Florida's Space Coast, coming up on a minute and a half into flight.
All 3 boosters operating as expected.
Some onboard views from the rocket here as we come up to the 2nd minute in flight.
All 3 boosters operating as expected. Everything looks good. And we fired the power valve, pressurizing the reaction control system on the 2nd stage. Pressure's coming up. Everything looks good there. What we're looking for is going to closed loop guidance.
We've also passed through max
3
Q.
or 4 seconds. And we've started closed loop guidance. Vehicle maneuvering as expected. All 3 engines continue to look good.
Coming up in just over a minute, we'll see the port and starboard booster cut off at T plus 3 minutes 50.
And we are 3 minutes to core BECO.
That is that core BECO event.
And the vehicle is now 1/2 its liftoff weight.
We
All
just
3 engines operating normally. Everything looking good.
3 minutes into flight.
And the vehicle's now 29 nautical miles in altitude, 64 miles downrange, traveling at 5,300 miles per hour. Everything continues to look good.
Less than a minute from port and starboard booster cut
And
off.
we've just passed through the Kármán line, reaching 100 kilometers in altitude.
After booster cutoff, those side boosters will be
Everything's
jettisoned.
looking good.
About 2 seconds later.
2 minutes to core BECO. Coming up on throttle down on the strap-ons. And we've begun throttling down the strap-on boosters in preparation for cutoff. We've now achieved min-power level on the strap-ons. And cutoff. We have cutoff port and starboard boosters coming up on strap-on, and we have strap-on separation. Disturbances look good. Throttled up the core booster. We're now at EPL on the single stage booster. And we've re-enabled steering following separation of the strap-ons. Everything looking good.
We just heard confirmation of port and starboard booster jettison. We have about a minute and a half until
Things moving nominally with this 16th and final flight of the Delta IV Heavy rocket. They've begun the chill down of the RL-10C2-1 engine on the upper stage. Now 5 minutes into flight. Less than just about 30 seconds from now, we'll see booster engine cutoff for that final core, BECO. That's it. T plus 5 minutes, 35.6 seconds. They'll be followed less than 10 seconds later by first stage separation and then main engine start MES1 at T plus 5 minutes 55.1 seconds.
And core booster is throttling down, coming up on booster engine cutoff. And we have Pico. Cutoff on the booster, everything looking good. And state operation occurred right as expected. NEDs have deployed. And we have pre-start, start, and full thrust. RL10 is up and running normally. Everything looking good. Enabled steering of the second stage. Second stage operating normally. Coming up on bearing separation.
And just a note here, because this is a payload for the National Reconnaissance Office, they're planning to cut the feeds shortly after payload separation here.
5 seconds to bearing sep, and we have bearing separation. Disturbances look good. Upper stage is operating normally. And once again, steering has been re-enabled after the separation event.
This is
And with fairing separation, this is expected to be the final event that we will get video of on the beginning of this final flight for the Delta rocket. And let's listen into Tory's comments on this.
Well, good afternoon. A lot of you know that the Delta IV Heavy is, of course, the most metal of all rockets, setting itself on fire before it blasts into space. But I also want to talk about its tremendous contribution to our nation, to exploration, to national security. The Delta IV Heavy still today flies missions that no other rocket can fly. Soon Vulcan will pick up that mantle, and we're going to retire this venerable rocket that has made so much important work for our country. And I want to thank everyone who has been involved with the Delta IV Heavy. We have many employees who are here for the very first Delta IV launch, who are still here now for the last Delta IV launch to send off this great vehicle into its well-earned retirement. Thank you all.
So again, because this is a mission for the National Reconnaissance Office, this will be the conclusion of the sights that we'll see here from ULA. But before we go ahead and peel off for the afternoon, do want to thank the people who helped make this live launch coverage possible. Turning back to the live chat here, always grateful for your support. So our thanks to 1130 MRG for a £2 super chat. Really appreciate that. Asking if there are any Kerbal Space players here in the live chat. I'm guessing there may be one or two lurking around. Our thanks to Marcus Gallegos for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that, Marcus. Thanks for sharing some generosity here. And if you got that channel membership, be sure to thank Marcus in the live chat if you haven't already. Our thanks to Ranch Dressing for a $2 super chat. Asking if we could send up a bottle of ranch up to space, which I don't think they're able to manifest up to the ISS, but you never know. Elon sent a Tesla Roadster off on a Vulcan Heavy rocket, so I suppose anything is possible these days, right? Kelly O'Town with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Kelly. Saying happy to be getting some sun and watching this launch. I'm glad it was a lovely afternoon for you. One of our wonderful channel members and moderators here, Stephanie B, marking 13 months of channel membership. Really appreciate you, all your help with that, Stephanie. Saying cool channel, awesome commentator. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Our thanks to Don Pierce for a $2 super chat as well. Thank you, Don. To Mel Roberts Herald, another one of our great channel members, saying thanks to Will and all the folks that make up the Spaceflight Now team for educating us so we actually know something about what we're fortunate enough to witness with these launches. And that is certainly our intent, is to help educate everyone. Just checking the launch replay here. Let's listen in for a second.
The final United Launch Alliance Delta IV Heavy rocket, carrying NROL-70 for the National Reconnaissance Office and closing Delta's 6-decade legacy of excellence in space.
Coming back to the live chat here. Now we've caught that replay from ULA. Our thanks to Josh King for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Josh, for supporting us at that level. Saying thank you for your service, Delta IV Heavy. As mentioned a little bit earlier, I believe the Delta IV Heavy, out of its now 16 flights, 12 of them have been for the National Reconnaissance Office. So it is certainly a workhorse for that agency. Bill Sugden with a £10 super chat. Thank you so much, Bill. Just making sure his hamsters are well fed. Alrighty. Thank you, Flippercast, for a $10 super chat. One of our channel members. It says, safe travels, Delta IV. Our thanks also to Charles McMahon for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Charles, who says, thank you for exceptional coverage. Well, thank you for supporting us and allowing us the opportunity to bring you this coverage. Also, thanks to Applesyo for a $5 super chat. I like that name. Really appreciate the support here. Also to channel member SG, the favorite of mine, the thumbs up Corgi, and a $5 super chat. Good to see you this afternoon, SG. One of our channel members, Callistia Lee, here as well. Very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Callistia, and for gifting some channel memberships earlier today as well. Callistia says, awesome coverage as always, Will. Thanks to the mods and all of Spaceflight Now. And finally, thanks to Esso the Tiger for a very generous $2 super chat. Thank you, Esso. Who says, Delta IV Heavy. Let's light this candle one last time, obviously coming in just before we saw the liftoff of that vehicle on its final flight. Well, given we have a successful launch now in the books, or at least a successful liftoff, we'll likely get word a little bit later today on the results of the payload deployment, although without many specifics. Let's go ahead and wrap up this mission. But before we go, as we always do, let's go ahead and check out, I'll look at some mission stats on where we have landed. United Launch Alliance as a company, this was their 160th overall orbital launch. This was their 99th U.S. National Security mission. This was their 35th mission for the National Reconnaissance Office, or the NRO. This was the 389th and final Delta rocket family flight. This was the 293rd Delta rocket to launch from Cape Canaveral. This was the 16th and final Delta IV Heavy rocket launch, the 12th, as previously mentioned, for the NRO specifically. This was the 43rd overall orbital launch from Pad 37, and the 35th Delta IV launch from Pad 37 as well. Moving on to some industry stats, this was the 25th orbital launch from Florida, the 38th orbital launch from U.S. soil this year, the 41st from a U.S. rocket company, and this was the 68th orbital launch around the globe, including a couple of failures that happened this year. Here's a look at where we stand on the old pie chart here. 41 launches from the U.S. on the year, marking 60% of all orbital launches so far in 2024. China coming in second with 15, making 22% of the launches. Russia with 5 was expected to be 6 today, but of course they had an issue with their maiden flight of the Angara rocket earlier. We'll look to see if they're able to launch that vehicle coming up perhaps as early as tomorrow. And while this was the finale for United Launch Alliance here at Pad 37, that doesn't mean that this pad is going dormant, as we will see likely another tenant coming into this pad. At least that is the prospective plan here. Before this mission and in the run-up to this launch, again going back to the briefing with the heads of SLD 45, the NRO, and Tory Bruno with ULA, we did hear about the future of this pad and its prospective tenant, as SpaceX is eyeing this space as a site where it may be launching its future Starship vehicle from here. This may be one of 2 pads where we may see Starship rockets fly, including Pad 39A. So here is Brigadier General Pansenhagen on the path forward for this particular launch pad and what comes next.
Immediately following the flight, the lease is still with ULA, so they still have things there. But we have entered the environmental impact statement process, so SAF-IE is leading that from the Pentagon. Nominally, that's about a 2-year process, so we won't make any decisions on the future of Slick 37 until we understand what any potential environmental impacts would be.
Safe, secure, and clean. We'll render it in that condition and return it to the Space Force to be used by whoever else needs it.
And so yes, it'll still be some time before potentially SpaceX is launching its own rockets from Slick 37. So they're going through that assessment right now. They've gathered public comments through both virtual forums as well as in-person meetings here on Florida's Space Coast. And even if that go-ahead is given, it'll still be at least a couple of years of approvals, permitting, and actual construction. So don't expect to see Starship launching from Slick 37 in the super near future. But also don't be surprised if, in the years to come, a Starship tower is erected where you currently see the mobile service tower here at Slick 37. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wind down our coverage. We sincerely appreciate all of you who have been with us throughout the duration today. Our thanks to our wonderful moderators in the live chat for helping to keep things kosher and allow for a wonderful conversation to take place. Thanks to Stephanie B. and Rusty Shackelford. Did not catch if Astor Joe and Astor Jen were able to join us, but we certainly appreciate them regardless. Our thanks also to our friend P. Carsons with Max Q Productions, standing by to help try and track the Delta IV Heavy rocket today. Of course, want to thank our launch photography team of Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane making his way back to Florida. If you're not already following them on X, you can find them here at their channels. Adam at Aburn NYC, Michael Kane, MD Kane Jr. Both took some stellar eclipse shots, and you can see Adam's photography from this final Delta IV Heavy mission right here on X, coming up in just a little bit. And also be sure to follow Spaceflight Now as well. Our thanks to our editor, Stephen Young, for helping out in the field, as well as providing technical support for the live stream itself. And most importantly, thanks to you for being here on a Tuesday afternoon to witness some history. The sunset of 60 years of flights with a Delta family of rockets. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourself, be good to others. And before we head off, we hope to see you back here right about or shortly after midnight, as we do have one more launch before we're able to go to sleep. SpaceX getting ready to send up another Falcon 9 on the Starlink 6-48 mission, launching no earlier than midnight tonight. Until then, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and of course, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.